67, and I was born in Melbourne. My umbilical cord was cut at the Royal Women's Hospital, so I belong in Melbourne. That's how I see it. I'm Bunurong man on my mother's side and Jar Jar Wurrung man on my father's side, I suspect. I'm still getting a lot of information from the heritage and the link-up mob regarding my family, my background. When you're using methadone or drugs or any kind of drugs and that, your thinking is a little awry, especially when you've got to make some determinations as to why you're robbing people, things like this and that. Well, the basic reason is you're robbing, so that you're going to get drugs.
I never looked for an excuse to become a criminal, but I noticed as you get older, looking back from when I was young, I think it was the way I was brought up, the family environment, to be honest. I didn't have a very good upbringing in that department. I spent many years in a boys' home. I've seen some horrible things. Some of the things I don't like to speak about, how bad a human being can get.
I'm very self-conscious of my record. I just finished working at the Royal Melbourne nursing here. I went back to Tasmania and they said I needed to get mental health treatment, consequent to going back. And I couldn't really find anyone, I just deteriorated badly. I had some substance abuse issues as well. And I just broke the law. I saw a doctor for assistance and help and I just was really unwell. I transgressed the line of seeing him too much and they got a restraining order on me. And I remember one day I was just broken. And much to my horror and dismay, I went to jail for a month. There wasn't any treatment in jail, psychiatric treatment to assist me. And when I came out, I had no home, no accommodation. So it was everything went. And my career was, I'd asked people to assist me to try and get my job and my career in my home state where I came from. But because I had such a turbulent history of mental health problems from an early age, and I'd worked in the government system for quite a while, no one was really that willing to help me get it back. It was more of a case of, oh, well, you should go somewhere else, you should go somewhere else.
I've been working in the community sector for about 30 years, and in the very early stages of my work in the community sector, I was working as a youth worker. I think at one point I counted, I'd participated in 20 public demonstrations in 1 year that were related to my work. We had what we called a beggar's banquet outside the Regency Hotel. It was a well-attended demonstration. There were many hundreds of people at the demonstration. The first part of the demonstration was really peaceful, but at some point, and no one can actually really remember exactly what happened, but the situation became extremely volatile and there was an all-out blue between police and demonstrators. And my particular involvement in that was that I just happened to look up and see a police officer grab my friend from behind and pull her hair and pull her back, and her neck sort of was ajar and back, and I was fearful for her safety. So I actually ran toward the scene, and just as I reached the police officer who held my colleague, I felt a hand come and I also was grabbed by the hair and pulled off and then dragged some metres away into a divvy van. And as I was going from being dragged from the demonstration back to the divvy van, a very large police officer stood on my foot quite purposefully, and I said, "I'll have you for assault," which was probably the worst thing that I could have done, because by the time I'd been taken from the place of the demonstration and taken to the Russell Street cells, an assault police charge had been laid on me. I often wondered about, what happened with that finding of guilt, and it wasn't until last year, which is 1987 to 2010, 23 years later, when I applied for a position as manager here at Flat Out. And one of the requirements of Department of Human Services funding is that all employees undergo a police record check, which I did, and to my absolute astonishment, my assault police finding of guilt from 1987 reappeared.
Fitzroy Legal Service operates a criminal legal practice and has for a long time, and one of the things that we've observed over time and why we've been involved in advocacy in this area is that some of the most significant impacts of having any engagement with the criminal justice system happen at this stage, way down the track, when people are trying to reintegrate and rehabilitate and remake their lives, but as a result of having this criminal record, they're struggling. People started to come to us and say, you know, I just can't get a job, I can't get on with my life, I don't feel like trying anymore. Every time I go into an interview, I have to discuss this thing that happened ages ago, and you just see this pattern of underachieving and not really feeling integrated back into the community. A standard any finding of guilt will show up for 10 years on a person's record. Now that's an extremely long time, and I've got to say, for us advising people, it'll take 7 years before you can apply for a job and not have to talk about how you possessed marijuana or how you stole from a shop. That's difficult advice to have to give, because it doesn't really reflect, first of all, the court's attitude, and I don't think it reflects community attitude either. I think if it was actually clear to people the type of just prejudice that causes and the types of consequences it has on people that are maybe very, very qualified, I don't think people would really feel comfortable with that.
Something around 600 or 700,000 people across Australia every year get a criminal decision made about them. They may or may not go to prison. Most of them don't go to prison. So that's a lot of people every year who've got something on their record. And that's really a significant factor to bear in mind when we're thinking about the breadth of the use of criminal record checks. Mm-hmm. A colleague was telling me about a relation of hers who had been using, I think it was a student concession card on the trams. And using a student concession card on the tram, if you're not a student, is obtaining a financial advantage by deception, which is a really serious offence in that it can carry a very high penalty for a very serious one. That would obviously carry a very, very low penalty because it's very minor what was done. But the problem with that has been for that person that the offence obtaining a financial advantage by deception appears on their record. And that's an indictable offence under the Crimes Act, and a really serious, it doesn't say brackets because they misused a student concession card on the tram. And so that becomes really difficult for that person whenever they go for a job. And I think there's also interesting interconnections there between mental illness and minor offending, that people with mental illnesses can commit minor offences, can simply be a bit in your face, or can sort of incite or inspire assault, or can simply find themselves behaving in ways that's regarded as inappropriate, and can therefore find themselves with a record which is not actually to do with their harm or their risk to the community, but something to do with the way their behaviour is being kind of classified.
For me now, it's 6 years since I've offended. I was this about 6, and I can say that I won't again offend. Given the, I guess there's a rolling stone of different things there, because I got a public housing place, so I had somewhere solid and secure to go to, and I could start rebuilding my life. I got treatment for my illness and my problems. But I said that's nice, but I guess everyone likes to work as well, and to feel a part of the community.
We've had over 200 people through the program over the time we've been running it, and in that time we've had less than 5% fall back into their old habits, which, when you're talking about people with drug addictions and people with criminal records, that's the complete opposite of the standard statistic. So what we're proving is that a job allows people to stay clean and be productive members of society. We know that with a little bit of support, we end up with excellent employees through the second step program. The impact it has on the broader family too. We know that children of criminals are more likely to become criminals themselves. So if we can break that cycle and give them a dad who's got a job and who gives them an example of getting up in the morning, having a shower, packing your lunch, going to work, coming home at night, whinging about your day at work, but at least it gives them a sort of a role model that having a father incarcerated or a father who works in crime doesn't do. So that is it's a lovely sort of side effect that we get.
One thing I might comment on is that as a sort of a best practice area or good practice area is that in Victoria and several other states we now have the working with children checks, which have been in place now for 6-7 years. And whilst I was quite concerned about that initially when that was being proposed, it does seem to me to be a model that's quite interesting, because the working with children check process, which is the same across a number of states, is that if you want to work with children, you apply to the agency, and the agency applies various criteria, and the agency has criteria which very broadly will say these particular offences, so sex offending, drug trafficking, very serious offences, a person cannot get a working with children check. And then there are some others that are even some violence offences and so on that are normally you won't get a check. You might not be allowed to work with children, but you may if you can argue, explain. And there's a third category which is lower again, specific offences, which say normally you would get your check to work, but we might not let you in certain circumstances. All of those categories have really clearly built-in criteria and mechanisms for appeal and review, so that you can attend, you can put in submissions, you can go to VCAT, and you can argue why you ought to get your working with children check. So that it's really very clear and it's very specific to the job, because those offences that are specified there are specifically related to your risk to children. And it means that once you've got your working with children check, you can go and work and it's clear. It also means that if you don't get it, you'll simply have to go and work in another sector, but no one will know about that. So in a sense, it's quite a nuanced mechanism, I think. I think that's sort of, because it does focus on relevance and it keeps things private to the person. So the person says, well, realistically, I'm not going to be able to work with children. I'm going to have to reinvent myself, get another job, get another qualification if they've got really serious sort of sexual offences or whatever. But it kind of keeps it very contained.
What it means to me having a job, well, it means the world to me. Like, I feel it's security in all aspects of life for me right now, and it's in a drug-free environment. We have drug testing, we have all sorts of things here, and you've got to come to work straight. You've got to eat your vegetables, you've got to get your sleep, you've got to get up in the morning and cut the mustard. I think if I didn't take this job, I'd probably be in prison or dead, one of the two. So this is a bonus, really. It's like winning the lotto. I don't know about winning the lotto, but it's all right.
And when I work with people on the streets, I don't require any money for that. I do it out of the goodness of my heart. And, I see, I work on other people because they're struggling the same way I was struggling at their age. So it's my responsibility as a cousin of theirs, invariably, to talk to them, to engage with them.